Hi viewers, welcome back to Master J Skills. In today's video, we will see what are the difference between a Spring Framework and Spring Boot and why exactly we have switched from Spring Framework to Spring Boot. Please watch this video without skipping for more clear understanding and please keep supporting me by subscribing to Master J Skills. Without making any delay, let's understand what are the difference between the Spring Framework and Spring Boot. The first point is Spring is an open source, lightweight framework widely used to develop enterprise application. So it's a framework which is specifically used to develop an enterprise application like web-based applications, whereas Spring Boot is built on top of conventional Spring framework widely used to develop REST API. Not only REST API, we can develop a standalone as well as a web-based application using Spring. So as per the microservice architecture, it always focuses on the small tiny application which acts as a microservice where it always exposes a REST APIs to communicate with the other microservice. So in industry, most of the companies are using Spring Boot to develop REST APIs. It is basically built on top of Spring Framework itself. So let's see the next difference. To test the Spring project, we need to set up the server explicitly. So just think that we have built our enterprise or web-based application. Once we build the WAR file, then we to test that particular WAR file, we have to deploy in some server. So this complete process will be manual. Like we have to copy that particular WAR file to deployment folder of a server. This complete is a manual process where it requires an explicit server. Whereas in Spring Boot offers embedded servers such as a Tomcat, Jetty and Undertow. So these are some of the embedded server which Spring Boot has given us. So here no need to deploy our application explicitly to the server. Once the application has started, embedded server itself will pick it up. So this is one of the difference between Spring Framework and Spring Boot. Let's see the next difference. It helps to create a loosely coupled application. So the main advantage of using Spring Framework is a loosely coupled application where using the dependency injection of a Spring Framework feature. But wherein Spring Boot, it helps to create a standalone application. But using a Spring Framework, we can't specifically create a standalone application, whereas in Spring Boot, we can create a standalone application. The next difference is the most important feature of a Spring Framework is a dependency injection, which I have already said. So mainly the Spring Framework has introduced for loose coupling that is implemented with the help of a dependency injection. Whereas in Spring Boot, the most important feature of a Spring Framework is auto configuration. So here most of the explicit or manual process is eliminated with the help of auto configuration. So this we will see in the other video how the auto configuration will work in the Spring Boot. The Spring Framework does not provide a support for an in-memory database. So it doesn't have an in-memory database feature. So in Spring Boot, it offers several plugins for working with an embedded and in-memory databases such as H2. So we will see this in-memory as well in later some of the videos. So Spring Boot has a in-memory database like H2, which is embedded into the Spring Boot. So the next difference is developers manually define dependencies for the Spring project in pom.xml. So in case of required any dependencies, then they will be manually adding into the pom.xml. But wherein Spring Boot comes with a concept called a status in pom.xml file that internally takes care of downloading the dependencies, jars based on the Spring Boot requirements. For example, if I want specifically for database, if I add a starter dependency of a JPA, or then it will include most of the dependent jars of the that particular feature, which is nothing but a database related features. We will see starters in deep in other video. So we have to do manual process, and here we can have the starters. So starters is nothing but a bundle of a jars. So if we have included only one jar, that's enough to handle most of the features available in that particular functionality. Let's see the next difference. Configurations are done in XML files. So all the deployment descriptors is called as an deployment descriptor, where a complete configuration of application will be defined under the XML file. Where in Spring Boot, XML configuration is completely eliminated as it has a auto configuration feature. So this has made a very lightweight for the application. So how this will be handled is with the help of auto configuration, which we have already saw. Next difference is, to create a Spring application, the developers write a lots of code, and here in Spring Boot it reduces the lines of code. So Spring Boot has made a developer's life much easier with the help of starters, embedded servers, and eliminating XML configurations. And it has given lots of annotations, where with the help of those annotations we can have a lot of functionality done without much effort. So these are the main differences of Spring Framework and Spring Boot. So let's revisit one by one. First is the Spring Boot is a framework, and it is used for developing an enterprise application. Spring Boot is built on top of Spring Framework, which is used to develop a standalone and REST API as well as a web-based application. So the next is, it requires an explicit server, whereas a Spring Boot is embedded servers. So the next difference is, Spring Boot will create a loosely coupled application, whereas Spring Boot creates a standalone application. Next is the Spring Framework. Most important feature of a Spring Framework is a dependency injection, whereas most important feature of a Spring Boot is auto configuration. The next is, the Spring Framework does not have an in-memory database, whereas the Spring Boot have a in-memory database such as a H2. The next difference is, the developer manually have to manage the dependencies in pom.xml, whereas the Spring Boot has given a starters, which are a bundle of dependency will be included in the pom.xml. So the next difference is, configuration file, that is a deployment descriptor, is used in the Spring Framework to configure the application, whereas in Spring Boot, the deployment descriptor, which is an XML file, is completely eliminated and introduced auto configuration. The last difference is, the developer has to write a lots of code, including a business logic, to configure and manage the complete application, whereas in Spring Boot it has reduced lines of a code due to the auto configuration feature of a Spring Boot. Yeah, these are the main difference between a Spring Framework and Spring Boot, and this is a more of a short interview question as well. So you can specify these are the main differences in the interview. Hope you all got about all the points. If you want me to explain these differences with examples of using a application or using an example, then please drop in the comment box. I will explain each of these points with an example. So if you still have any doubts, please drop in the comment box, so I'll make sure to clear all your doubts. So that's all for today. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks again for watching.